Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us live for today's webinar. My name is Alakia, and I'm the technical writer at Amity. Amity provides customer success managers with the platform they need to retain and grow their customers at scale. We're really excited for today's webinar as we're joined by our good friend from Utrecht who will teach us about improving your onboarding process with customer effort score. Our presenter today is Jessica Pfeiffer. She is the CCO and co-founder of Utrecht. She spent her career in customer-centric environments, and she's very knowledgeable about how to mobilize your customers using metrics. So I hope you're all looking forward to her presentation today. Utrecht is a really great customer feedback management platform that helps customer success teams measure and manage metrics like NPS, customer satisfaction, and customer effort. Amity's customer success platform integrates with Utrecht so that our joint customers can put customer experience metrics at the core of their business. Now I just want to share a few housekeeping notes. We'll send the recording and the slides to everyone later this week, so keep an eye on your email. We also have a Q&A planned at the end of this webinar, so at any point, open your Q&A panel on Zoom and send us your questions. You can also join us on Twitter using the hashtag CSWebinar and tag @GetAmity and @Utrecht. You can share any screenshots or useful insights you gain from this webinar. For anyone joining us today for the first time, Amity provides a customer success management software that allows health scoring, tracking engagements, automating emails, analytics, and more. If you want to learn more, you can request a demo online, and I'm posting the link in the chat, or you can contact me directly and we can arrange something. So that's all you're going to hear about Amity because I'm super excited to introduce today's presenter, Jessica Pfeiffer. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's get started.
Thank you, Alakia, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be able to come and speak today on a metric that seems to be rising in popularity these days amongst the customer success community. As Alakia mentioned, I am the CCO and co-founder of Utrecht. We are a platform for boosting customer happiness, and so we look and live these metrics every day, from NPS to CSAT to CES, and we help companies not only measure and collect that feedback, but also analyze and break down that feedback to really turn it into actionable insights so that companies can close the loop. And we'll end up speaking to all of those things today when we look at the metric of customer effort. So why the focus on onboarding today? I mean, this is such a hot topic, I think, in general for customer success professionals. This really is the first impression that a customer has with us. You could say that the seeds of retention or churn are laid here because a smooth, effortless process is what sets the stage. All of us are trying to get to value with our customer, and onboarding either speeds that up or it creates obstacles. Onboarding is also a very multifaceted time for the customer. They touch us in different ways. They may experience the product, our team, various processes that they have to flow through. All of these things are areas we strive, I think, to create and improve as part of our roles. So, when we think about this, though, that's a lot of different areas to touch, and so it can be very hard to make improvements because cross-functional collaboration and overhaul of these types of things is very time-consuming. I'm sure we all struggle with priorities here. It's hard to know what to focus on. And most of us may have thought a little bit about how to have an onboarding touch point. Maybe it's a conversation that you have with your customers at the end of the process. But either it's a very loose process and not really institutionalized, or I think companies tend to over-engineer this point a little bit. Maybe they send out a 10-question survey and put customers through a long process to kind of sign off at the end of this. And so I think there can be ways, and we'll talk about some ways to make this a little more simple. And for those of us that aren't doing it yet today, thinking about onboarding improvements, there are ways to do this without a lot of big corporate efforts. So what we're going to cover off on today, I'm going to introduce you to this metric, customer effort score. We're going to talk about why effort or ease is really an interesting way to talk to our customers and get some feedback on a very specific area of the experience. I'll take you through a practical example. I'll actually be using an example of our own business where we're using CES, so Utrecht on Utrecht. I'll share a few best practices for getting started. And then I will speak a moment to Net Promoter Score and customer effort together, because I'm sure a lot of you today are actually measuring NPS already, and these metrics do go hand in hand. So the quick primer on customer effort. What is customer effort? It is a metric. It was developed a little under a decade ago by CEB, which is now part of Gartner. It was originally designed for service interactions. The idea is that you want to get at the ease of a transaction, an interaction, or a process. So, in this example, how easy was it for you and for our business to get started using Utrecht? It's a simple mean average. It's gone through some iterations on the scale. It started out as a 5-point scale, and then the team did further research and they landed on a 7-point scale. So that scale runs from very difficult to very easy, with 7 being the highest score, and 6 and 7 obviously being the top 2 box scores. Why did this team zero in on effort? So when CB Gartner did this massive study, effortless and ease, that concept was the only meaningful attribute of satisfaction when evaluating a process, task, or action. So that's a really interesting element, because I think most companies, when they're doing traditional satisfaction surveys, might have a main satisfaction question and then 5 attributes that they're trying to get at. And so in the process of simplifying and really digging into each of those attributes, the one that rose to the top was effortless and ease. And interestingly, the question as they formulated it was 25% more predictive of loyalty than the next best metric. So there's some pretty compelling things behind the customer effort concept. And if this is something that you're interested in, they wrote a whole book on it. It's called The Effortless Experience, and it digs into all of the really exciting new things they discovered around the value of experience in retention. And I thought this quote was interesting. You need to give your customers fewer reasons to be disloyal, and the best way to make that happen is to reduce customer effort. And I think we can all attest to this in our roles. More than any other vector, effort is often that thing that makes you look for an alternate solution when you're frustrated. So this is something I'd recommend if any of you are interested in pursuing this topic after our discussion. Why are we actually focusing on customer effort in an onboarding scenario? So the nice thing about this question, while it was developed for service, is our role in onboarding is to reduce friction. And so we have lots of potential friction points throughout the onboarding process. You've got the success team and the people side of the equation. Part of our job is to make the experience of working with our product easier. Maybe we're holding our customers' hands a little bit. There's also the element of documentation, our help center, flows in the product. All of these elements can either help our cause or create more confusion and frustration. And then just fundamentally the experience. We all make an implicit promise to customers and set some expectations about what it will take to get going. So did we keep that promise? And how can we learn if we did in a really streamlined way and ask the right question? And CES actually is a very appropriate question in the onboarding setting. Some reasons why both customers and I think you'll really like it. So for customers, this pointed question about effort and ease of getting started or completing an action or a task, it's very relevant for them. It's very easy to give feedback on that question. It's a short question, so you can use this question in isolation, maybe in conjunction with an open-ended text field to get more context, but you can learn a lot with just the one rating. And then, I think receiving this question from a vendor or a business that you work with conveys an investment in success. So, as a customer, if I receive this question from a business that I work with, I get a sense of, they really do care how I'm feeling about this interaction, and ease really gets at that. For you as the recipient of this feedback, I think you're going to love it because it does get you specific information. It is a targeted question. Therefore, it's very actionable. I love NPS and we use it, and you should keep using it if you do. But sometimes it's great at a specific milestone to ask a very pointed question. And so you'll see that the results from this can be very, very focused. And honestly, I think you'll be surprised at what you learn, and you can start to make some real improvements based off of that feedback. I'm having a little trouble switching my screen. What's happened? Oh my goodness. I seem to have gotten kicked out of the webinar. I'm rebooting here. Okay, hopefully everyone is still able to hear me and we are all set. So we'll move on to the actual case study example that I wanted to share with you. Let's see, I'm getting a message. Okay, perfect. Thank you. For some reason, I got kicked off of the presentation. All right, we're back. So let me take you into the case study section. And this is really an example of our own business and our own story. And so what we did here and why we decided to bring CES into our experience is, we obviously as a business and customer feedback, we were collecting Net Promoter Score at various points along our customer journey. But as we sort of expanded the business and started moving into different metrics, and then we launched different channels. You can survey an app, you can survey an email. We started having lots of different experiences that we wanted to understand a little better, especially as customers were getting set up, because suddenly the setup process felt different depending on the types of parts of our product that you wanted to use. The same held true as we started to grow into more enterprise customers, and suddenly we had self-service customers and enterprise customers. So this mix of new features, a more complex business, really led us to want to ask a more focused question earlier on in the experience, so we could understand if we were setting people up for success with whichever part of the product they were planning to use. So an example here on the left is actually what the implementation that we went forward with. So we use Intercom, and we decided to actually go with an email survey for this particular interaction. And we set up an auto-triggered campaign. So any new users that hit a very specific milestone that we decided was what we think was critical to kind of onboarding success, those people received an email survey from us. And so you can see here it was really simple. It was just, can you provide us some feedback on this one question? Our customers answered the question on ease. How easy was it for you to get started with Utrecht? And then depending on their answer, we had a question that we asked here. So in the case of a lower score, we asked them, what would have made it easier for you? A higher score, we wanted to know what were the things that you loved about your onboarding experience with us. So this was how we set it up. And then our plan for what to do with it, of course we were looking at the analytics that were coming back inside of Utrecht, but we also wanted to bring some visibility to customer effort throughout the organization. And so one place that we always put our feedback from customers directly is into Slack. That is the place where we have company-wide visibility. And so we had a dedicated Slack channel just for our customer effort results. Our sales team was really interested to see those customer effort feedback elements directly into Salesforce. So we made sure that we were getting it into our system of record there. And then we did make sure that we were closing the loop, especially when we were getting some critical feedback from customers. So conversations would be opened up in Intercom so that the support team could come in and speed up replies to ensure that we were closing the loop and making sure that customers knew that that moment of feedback they chose to give us was actually being thought about and put into some long-term plans on how to make the experience better. So what was the actual outcome? We had very good response rates. 20% of the folks we sent to took the survey, and 50% of those left detailed comments. I put a little snapshot of what the feedback look like for us in our own dashboard? So this is the Utrecht dashboard where you can actually auto tag feedback. And so I had gone through and highlighted some of the things that rose to the top in conversation. And you'll see it's pretty specific. It's pretty actionable. Like, we got great feedback on the team and the overall usability of the product. Those were strengths for us. But our opportunity was that the documentation was creating friction. And, because the documentation was often linked to technical setup, those two elements were very much intertwined, and was really a glaring opportunity for us to lean in and make some improvements. So, what we've done to actually improve the experience, so we took some actions. We've actually gone through and done some institutionalization of a documentation update process, and we've made some prioritized updates for some edge cases that were uncovered very specifically in the feedback, that we were able to then go and make sure we're cleaner and clearer so that we could remove those frustrations. We also did some major work to our onboarding guide, so feedback around the help center. We wanted to make sure that the good information we did have was in the right places for people to find quickly and easily, so they were getting relevant materials fast. So this whole process for us was not hard to get set up, and got us some very immediately helpful and actionable information. And net, we learned some new things. We surfaced some new, very specific feedback that we weren't getting through our NPS process. And we've actually improved our CES. So that number's up, and it's a journey, but we're now starting to get a new pulse post this improvement world with our new onboarding and our new processes. We're not the only people using CES, and there are a lot of other ways that you can use CES. So, the onboarding example, I think, is the one that's getting the most attention these days, and it's a really, really good one, especially for SaaS companies. But some other ways that we see CES being used, of course, the support interaction use case is there. Inside documentation pages, having an in-app moment there can be interesting. Maybe the question is something around, how easy was it for you to get your question answered. And then, a really common one now is feature flow completion. So maybe it's not an onboarding moment per se, but it's, inside a process where you have to complete a few steps and you really want to learn how to optimize those steps. Some of the customers that we work with that have been doing this, one of them actually has a great blog post out on this, MindTouch, if you want to go look for that. They've talked about their process of journey metrics, and they do NPS, they do CSAT, they now do CES, and they do that in a context of their onboarding flow, specifically because their self-service business needs a little more attention there, and they can really zone in and get some good quality feedback for that particular cohort of users. DocuSign also does this. If you're in there, you may see it when you're completing an envelope or some very specific process flows inside of DocuSign. They use CES to optimize those flows. And even HubSpot does this when they have new feature launches. They incorporate CES to get some specific learnings on those new flows. So lots of really, really applicable ways to bring CES into the fold for your business. So I'll leave you with a few best practices on getting set up with this. Getting started, you really need to think about three things if you want to roll out customer effort. One is, what is the milestone that you want to connect to this survey? Ideally, you can automate this to have some kind of rolling trigger, maybe through your CS platform, maybe through Salesforce or CRM or some kind of marketing automation system. This will just make life a lot easier for you to keep this process going. But if you can't be that exact, it's okay. Just get something out there to learn, get started. Maybe you pick a cohort of people that had recent experiences and you start there, but play around with it. The nice thing about this metric is it's not quite as high profile as NPS. So I feel like as teams, we can try new things here without necessarily the high degree of visibility and scrutiny. So you shouldn't be afraid to test and learn and see what you can get here. The other thing about this is the milestone that you choose is going to shape the exact question that you ask. So that how easy is it for you to question needs to have some modifier that is easy. So for us, it was getting started. But for you, it could be something slightly different. The second consideration is who gets this survey. Honestly, I really think you should hit your full range of stakeholders in this process. I wouldn't discriminate. I think the most important thing is that you can segment by the user type. So, if you have some stakeholders that are more of your decision makers, maybe you have technical implementation folks, just know and make sure that the solution that you use will allow you to see who that segment is, because you will want to look at that feedback with some context. And I think the third question that everyone always, or consideration that you need to have, is what is the best channel to do this? For us, when we did our particular interaction, we used email, but it honestly depends. When you have a self-service process where the milestone is in the product, an in-app survey is probably the best choice. When you have a CS managed process, maybe you have multi-channel points, some folks are in the app, some folks don't log into the app, maybe you lead with email. But this is another one, you've got choices, and I think you'll learn based on your business what makes the best sense for you. For closing the loop, even though CES is a secondary metric to something like NPS, you really should have some kind of closed loop process here. You should be thinking about who to share this with, who in the organization will benefit. Socializing it only improves transparency. So, if you do have the option, even just to start simple with something like Slack and get that posted to a channel where interested parties can see what's happening, it's a great place to start. And I would say, as far as getting back to customers, treat this with as much urgency as NPS. When you get a negative feedback from someone in that onboarding moment, have a workflow for responding. I mean, this is your first true success feedback moment, because this will probably happen before you get an NPS flow. So this is your chance to see if you're on track. It's also interesting because I think, this could be the first wonderful wow moment that your customer has with you. And if they are exceedingly happy with what's been going on, you may want to start seeding the testimonial process too. You don't necessarily have to wait to get them excited to start thinking about how they might write their case study. The last thing here is, how does CES and NPS work together? I think both together really level up your game as a CX professional and a CS professional. The two metrics can and do work together. Think about, NPS is your overall health check on happiness. It's recurring. It's always happening there. It's the persistent pulse. CES is your point in time metric for a very specific and critical milestone that you want to measure. And honestly, CES will help tee you up for a better NPS outcome, but you have to manage it. I mean, this gets back to, are you closing the loop? Are you responding quickly when customers are giving you those signals? I think you will get more powerful results when both are included in your toolkit. So with all these things, bringing CES and NPS and looking more at journey metrics, you're really on the path to understanding your full customer's journey. So to wrap up, with the few minutes we have left, just to summarize the things we talked about, go get started. It doesn't have to be complicated. Take a quick customer effort pulse after onboarding. You can start simple. You will see quick wins. You will have early feedback. It's going to be actionable for you. Your customers are going to feel like, hey, you're really putting our relationship first. You're starting to collaborate early with me. And your customers are going to help you prioritize what to do around onboarding and how to make that better. And you'll learn exactly where your strengths lie early on in the process when engaging with customers. So go forth. I highly recommend looking at customer effort. So with that, we've got about 6 minutes for Q&A. So I'm going to check here and see what kind of questions we have. Looks like people are posting questions to the panel, so I've got a few here. So one from Simon. We get a little pushback on the language of the question from our internal team. Any tips on getting alignment across the company on the phrasing of the CES question, I'm assuming is what Simon means. Well, I think there is some core rigor to the question in terms of the structure around ease. This metric was pretty rigorously developed, and so you want to keep ease at the core to keep it a customer effort question. Honestly, from there, I really think you want to be as specific as you can so that the customer can give that very direct feedback about the moment that you're interested in. So the nice thing about having an open-ended follow-up question is it will surface what the customer cares about the most, and those priorities will surface for you. So that is, I guess that's the advice I'd give you. Simon, since I know you're a customer, I'm always happy to talk to you as well. Britt wrote, what kind of response rate to the CES one question survey have you experienced? Did it improve with time and familiarity? So, the response rates to the CES one question survey, for us particularly, we saw on our survey about 20% response rate. This is going to depend, though, on the channel that you choose. So, it could be something where if you're doing an in-app survey, you might see response rates more in the 30 to 40%. Emails will be a little bit lower. But, because this isn't a recurring question for a user, every user is going to see it once in their experience. So I'm not sure that there's necessarily an improvement with time and familiarity because the customer gets this one shot to give that feedback. I just realized I think I'm supposed to turn this back over to Alaki, and I'm sitting here doing all the Q&A myself. So
no worries. I'm glad you got such a head start on answering questions.
It just
thanks everyone for posting questions.
You might want to lead this effort, but let me know if you want me to just keep driving or.
Yeah, no. So I guess we'll just keep going with the questions. So one person asks, should the CES be used throughout onboarding process, i.e. completion of major milestones, or only at the end? Is there a recommended best practice?
So I think using CES for onboarding is still a new and evolving thing. I wouldn't say that you want to ask it too many times. I would focus on if you feel like your customer effort process is long, if your onboarding process is long and there's a lot of time between milestones, then I think you could consider having the question burst at the end of those milestones. But I feel like for most businesses, there's not so much time necessarily to get through that flow. So you don't want to fatigue your customer with multiple pulse points. You just want to then have CES at the completion. And hopefully the customer will refer back to specific parts of that process. If you had several milestones they had to complete, and that'll help you prioritize among those few. You might start that way, Ramon, and then you end up over time perhaps moving to try a question after one of those specific milestone moments rather than at the end. So I would say start broad at first, and then depending on how your customers respond, you can go from there.
Great. So another question from Rihanna is, due to the long and complex nature of the programs we implement, I feel that everyone we ask would rate onboarding as not easy because our implementation usually is 8 to 12 weeks on average. Do you have a suggestion for other ways to phrase the customer effort score question?
It's funny. I did have someone bring something up like that similarly. Part of it may be expectation setting up front. I mean, I understand if you have a really complicated product or process. Sometimes it's just, again, getting back to what the customer expects. They may know that this is going to be a bit of a slog to get through. And so perhaps they would answer that question with a little bit more perspective, given the expectations that you've set. I don't have a specific wording adjustment I would make when you know that the question might minimize the effort, I guess, because you know it's a complex process. But the one thing you can do is tee up the question with some introductory language, to get them thinking about, well, we know this has been a long journey. We strive to remove as many roadblocks as we can in the process. And so then it can at least soften the question when you get to it.
So another question we have is, what other types of feedback gathering tactics have you tried, and what did the output of those look like in comparison to customer effort score?
If you're speaking for our personal journey, we've stuck with customer effort as the first question, because we really did, or we do feel like for us, ease is something that we want to continue to strive to put effort behind, product effort, just service effort. So we haven't tried anything differently there. But there are other questions in our toolkit. We have CSAT for other moments that we use, product satisfaction, service.
Okay, and one more question before we finish up. Are there questions that you have specifically catered to like different departments in your team, like customer effort score that goes to sales team, customer success team, etc.?
Well, the customer effort score itself is very flexible. So, you just want to make sure you're not sending the same question for everybody's effort to the same stakeholders, because they will get fatigued. But it's totally possible to have questions worded to address the needs or outputs of different teams. I think if all those teams are working on the same process or the same customer output, I wouldn't go so deep as to try and get answers on each of those particular stakeholders. I think the customer will take the lead and prioritize for you the things in the process that stood out to them, be that the sales interaction, be that something, for example, on the CS or the product side.
Thanks, Jessica. And if anybody asked a question or thinks of any more questions later, I'm sure Jessica will be happy to answer them via email or on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I do see one on here that I just wanted to respond to quickly.
Yeah, for sure.
Robin wrote, do you give feedback summaries to clients? I've heard some CS orgs share monthly or quarterly overviews to clients that submitted feedback during that time. This is what we heard. This is where we can improve, etc. So I would say that the customer effort, NPS feedback, all of this should be a part of your QBR relationship that you have. You should be starting and using that feedback as core to the conversation, so that your customer knows that you have heard them, that you're working on the things that were potentially high friction, that you're just generally listening and trying to build a more productive relationship. So that is absolutely the right approach.
Thanks, Jessica, for answering all those questions in such a great presentation. It was really insightful.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course, and thank you everyone who joined us live. Don't forget, we're going to send everything in an email by the end of the week, so keep an eye on that, and have a great rest of your day.